Now, if you've measured the frequency of wobbles in the previous video, compare your findings. Using a general statement, one might say that the child wiggled on the chair 2 times. However, using this definition of wiggling occurs when the child's movements results in only 2 legs of the chair being on the floor at any one time. The frequency of wiggling increases to 65 with 21 and 44 occurrences in each episode. If you measure the duration in the video of wiggling, compare your findings. Using this definition of wiggle occurs when the child's movement results in only 2 legs of the chair being on the floor at any one time. The time spent wiggling in each episode was 7 seconds and 41 seconds respectively. Or you can compare the latency of your findings. The latency of wiggling were calculated by noting the time from when a sweet was put in the mouth to the time when wiggling started. There were 2 latencies recorded, and these were 6 seconds and 8 seconds respectively. Other recording techniques: ABC recording, antecedent behavior and consequences. Running continuous recording provides a wealth of detailed information but are very time-consuming. Records of an instant of behavior are less time-consuming and intrusive, but are not as comprehensive. You could measure percent correct when the number of behaviors is different from the observation session to observation session. You take the number of corrects divided by the number of corrects and plus incorrects multiplied by 100%. There are other event-based methods. Each time you can go to various web pages to deepen your knowledge. We will not go through all the web pages here because it would take too long. Sometimes it is not possible to record behavior continuously. To address this problem, samples of behavior can be obtained from brief but frequent observation intervals. At predetermined intervals, the observer records whether or not the behavior is occurring. We will look at 3 kinds of time sampling: whole interval recording, partial interval recording, and momentary time sampling. One might decide to observe a behavior across different parts of the day. In this example, the day is broken into 7 observation periods. Depending on the behavior, the observation period can be of any duration. The period of observation is broken into a number of intervals of the same duration, called bins. You determine in advance the duration of these bins. Then, depending on your method of data collection, you insert either 1 or 0 into each bin and calculate the overall score at the end of the observation period. In whole interval recording, did the behavior occur across the whole interval? If the behavior occurred across the whole interval you're observing, insert a 1 for that interval bin. If it didn't occur across the whole interval, insert a 0 for that bin. The final statistics are calculated as a percentage. For example, it is said that the behavior occurred across so many percent of the total period of observation. With this method, there is a risk of underestimating the behavior. Make sure that you have clearly defined the behavior to record, then click to start the clip so you can practice your data collection. Practice your data collection with different bin sizes to see how this affects the overall profile of the behavior you are measuring.
Put some water in the ground, clean the cotton spray and pull the plug out.
In whole interval recording, the question is, did the behavior occur across the whole interval? Feel free to rewind the video to repeat the exercise if you haven't completed the exercise correctly the first time. In partial interval recording, the question is, did the behavior occur all the time within the interval? If the behavior occurred at all within the interval you're observing, insert a 1 for that interval bin. If it didn't occur within the interval, insert a 0 for that bin. The final statistic is calculated as a percentage. For example, it is said that the behavior occurred across so many percent of the total period of observation. This method does not capture duration and only a 1 recorded for multiple occurrences within the interval. Multiple behaviors, though, can be recorded. In partial interval, the question is recorded, did the behavior occur at all within the interval? Make sure you have clearly defined the behavior to record, and click to start this clip so you can practice your data collection. Practice data collection with different bin sizes to see how this affects the overall profile of the behavior you are measuring.
You have to put the plug in to the plug hole. You have to turn the water on, put some water in the ground, clean the cotton spray and pull the plug out.
In momentary time sampling, the question is answered, did the behavior occur right at the end of the interval? If the behavior occurred right at the end of the interval you're observing, insert a 1 for that interval bin. If it didn't occur at the end of the interval, insert a 0 for that bin. The final statistic is calculated as a percentage. For example, it is said that the behavior occurred across so many percent of the total period of observation. In this case, 4. Make sure that you have clearly defined the behavior to recur, then click the start of this clip so you can practice your data collection. Practice data collection with different bin sizes to see how this affects the overall profile of the behavior you are measuring. I'm not going to play the video again at this moment in time. Here is another video that you can play repeatedly to define and measure the behavior. Define the behavior and then record frequency, duration, and latency. The behaviors here could be cars entering or cars leaving the garage, people entering or people leaving the garage. Frequency, duration, and latency. Feel free to rewind and play this video as often as you need to. Regarding frequency, compare your findings. Frequency varied depending on the precision of the definition. For example, the number of people leaving was 6. But if you consider people leaving by car, leaving by car, there were 4. Leaving by foot, there was 1. Leaving by motorbike, there was 1. The total number of people arriving was 9. Those arriving by car were 4, and those arriving on foot were 5. So you can see how it is important to get a clear definition of the behavior before you start measuring. With regards to duration, compare your duration measurements from the garage video clip with the data below. You can see on the y-axis the duration in seconds, and on the x-axis the sequence of people leaving. With regards to latency, latency is the time taken from one event to another. Usually it marks the time taken to initiate some behavior. For example, the time taken to get out of the car once it has stopped. Latency and duration are often related. The latency to leaving the shop after entering it could be expressed as the duration of time spent in the shop. Once you have done these observations, you have to collect the inter-observer agreement. Obviously, for this you need at least two observers observing the same sequence of behaviors with an agreed definition. There are many different ways to calculate inter-observer agreement. The following slide introduces some of these. Total frequency count, mean count per interval, exact count per interval, interval by interval, scored interval, Unscored interval, duration and latency inter-observer agreements. Inter-observer agreement should be measured for at least 20% or more of the observations. The higher the inter-observer agreement percent, the better. However, inter-observer agreement should be at least 80 or more percent. If the calculations in the next few slides do not apply to your data, you should check the literature for more ways to calculate the inter-observer agreement. Total frequency count. Mean count per interval. Feel free to stop the tape if you take longer to read. Exact count per interval. Interval by interval. Scored interval. Unscored interval. Duration. Latency. When there are problems in agreement, if agreement is not obtained between two observers, it typically means one of the following. Problems with the definition. If the definition is not clearly defined, objective or complete, the observers may define the behavior differently. To fix this, the observer should agree a definition and practice scoring. The task is too complex. There may be too many behaviors to score. To fix this, simplify the task or provide more training for observers. Practice scoring. The record sheet is too complex. To fix this, redesign the sheet by locating related items next to each other, making sure that the fewest number of marks are required, or use icons to identify the behavior to observe. The observation period is too long. To fix this, reduce the length of the recording period or give observers more frequent breaks. Not sufficient observer training. To fix this, provide more training and practice. One of the observers is biased. To fix this, do not give the observer too much information about the purpose of the experiment. Inter-observer agreement should be obtained for a minimum of 20% of the sessions, but preferably for 25 to 40% of the sessions. Inter-observer agreement calculations should be evenly distributed across observations. Acceptable levels of inter-observer agreement are generally agreed to be above 80 to 90%. The smaller the changes in the behavior, the higher the inter-observer agreement should be. Summary. Choreography is a word we used at the start of this tutorial. Usually this term is used in the world of dance or theatre. It refers to the practice of designing sequences of movement of physical bodies and the detailed description of motion, form, or both. In short, the essence of defining and measuring behaviors is captured in the term choreography. Across every context where you find behavior, the challenge for the observer is to develop techniques to accurately reporting it. In other words, recording the choreography of the behavior. Here are sample behaviors extracted from the animation. We could label each behavior as an event, and for each event we could measure its duration or its latency to occur after the end of the previous behavior. Had the animations lasted for longer, we could have counted the number of instances of any of these behaviors, like the frequency. This flowchart, taken from LeBlanc et al., helps you decide what observation methods to use.